The first 4 hours, we passed over a destroyed land.
George S. Patton, Jr. believed he was born to be a soldier. That wasn't just ego, though he had plenty of that. It was his identity. He told people that in past lives, he had fought with Napoleon, marched with Caesar, and swung swords as a Viking. Maybe that was fanciful imagination, or maybe Patton just enjoyed the drama of it. But if you ever saw him stride into a command post in his polished riding boots, with pistols at his side and fire in his eyes, you'd believe him. Patton carried himself like a man who wasn't just fighting battles, but fulfilling a destiny. And that mix of brilliance, intensity, and sheer eccentricity made him one of the most unforgettable generals of World War II. But Patton wasn't only famous for his victories. He was famous for everything. His profanity-laced speeches, his relentless energy.
Who have not seen it do not know what hell looks like from the top. That's what Germany looks like.
His impatience with anything less than perfection, and his uncanny to rub people the wrong way. His soldiers both feared him and admired him. His enemies respected him. His allies often tolerated him. And his superiors, well, they spent a lot of time cleaning up after him. Patton was born in San Gabriel, California, in 1885. He grew up in a wealthy family that had deep military roots. His childhood was steeped in stories of glory. His ancestors had fought in the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, and young George devoured every tale of combat he could find. From the start, he was convinced he was destined to continue that tradition. He wasn't much of a reader at first. Some historians believe he may have had dyslexia, but he had a phenomenal memory and an imagination that ran wild with history. In 1909, he graduated from West Point. He wasn't top of his class, not even close, but he had shown enough grit and promise to earn his commission. He loved the pageantry of the military, the precision of drills, and the physical demands of soldiering. A natural athlete, he competed in fencing, shooting, and riding. In 1912, he represented the United States in the modern pentathlon at the Stockholm Olympics. The event included fencing, swimming, equestrian riding, running, and pistol shooting, essentially a soldier's skill set turned into sport. Patton finished 5th overall, not bad for America's very first time entering the event. His first real taste of combat came in World War I. Patton quickly saw the potential of tanks, a brand new weapon that few understood. He trained America's first tank crews in France and led them into battle in 1918. He was wounded in action, shot in the leg, but stayed on his feet long enough to keep his men moving. That injury gave him his first scar of combat, but far from discouraging him, it reinforced his belief that war was his natural element.
Achilles is the great warrior who was born for war.
When the war ended, Patton threw himself into the study of armored warfare. He wrote papers, trained units, and practiced tactics long before most of the U.S. Army thought tanks would matter. Many old-school officers still believed horses had a future on the battlefield. Patton disagreed. He was a cavalryman at heart, but he believed that the new steel cavalry would define the wars of the future. He wasn't wrong. Then came World War II, and Patton was unleashed. In November 1942, he led U.S. forces during Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa.
Convoy from America was heading east, the one from Britain heading south. At a given point west of Gibraltar, the British convoy would divide. For 12 hours, the two halves would proceed in opposite directions. Then the second half would reverse its course and follow the first, passing Gibraltar 24 hours behind. Thus, with clock-like precision, the combined operations would begin with simultaneous landings at Casablanca, Oran, Algiers. Casablanca.
The American Army was green and, frankly, underprepared. Early battles showed just how inexperienced they were. At Kasserine Pass, U.S. forces were mauled by the veteran German Afrika Korps. Eisenhower knew he needed a commander who could tighten discipline and instill confidence. That man was Patton. Patton took command of Second Corps, and overnight, the atmosphere changed. He demanded spotless uniforms, strict salutes, and constant readiness. Soldiers who had been lax suddenly found themselves under a commander who tolerated no excuses. Some grumbled that he cared more about appearances than fighting, but in reality, Patton believed discipline and pride translated directly into battlefield performance. And he wasn't just barking orders from the rear, he was out front, making sure everyone knew he was in the fight with them. At the Battle of El Guetar in March 1943, Patton's forces faced German armor head-on. It was tough, bloody, and chaotic, but they held. For the Americans, still learning how to fight the Wehrmacht, it was a turning point. They could take on Germany's best and not break. Patton's reputation skyrocketed. Next came Sicily in the summer of 1943. Here's where Patton's aggressive style and his ego really came to the forefront. The plan was for Montgomery's British forces to lead the drive while Patton supported, but Patton hated being anyone's second fiddle. He pushed his men forward at a blistering pace, seizing Palermo and then racing Montgomery to the strategic city of Messina. Patton won, arriving hours before Monty's troops. He basked in the glory, but it came at a price. During the campaign, Patton slapped two American soldiers who were suffering from combat fatigue, calling them cowards.
Your nerves. Well, hell, you're just a goddamn coward.
Today we understand this as PTSD. Back then, Patton saw it as weakness. When news of the incidents reached the press, a scandal erupted. Eisenhower was furious. Patton was forced to apologize to his men and was quietly sidelined from combat command. For a general who lived for battle, it was humiliation. But the Allies weren't done with Patton. In 1944, in the run-up to D-Day, they put him to use in a different way: deception. Operation Fortitude was the plan to convince the Germans that the invasion would come at Calais instead of Normandy. The key to the ruse was Patton himself. The Germans considered him the Allies' best offensive general, so when they saw fake armies and dummy tanks under his supposed command in southeast England, they believed it. They kept forces in Calais waiting for Patton, even as the real invasion stormed ashore in Normandy. When Patton finally returned to combat with the U.S. Third Army, he unleashed the kind of campaign only he could lead. After the breakout from Normandy in July 1944, his army surged across France with breathtaking speed. In just 2 weeks, his men advanced over 100 miles, capturing town after town and taking tens of thousands of prisoners. At times, they moved so fast that fuel became the limiting factor. His tanks literally sat idle, not because the Germans stopped them, but because the supply lines couldn't keep up. Patton was furious, but his advance had already become legendary. Then came December 1944, the Battle of the Bulge. The Germans launched a surprise counterattack through the Ardennes, catching the Allies off guard. Eisenhower needed a response, and Patton delivered. In one of the most impressive maneuvers of the war, he pivoted his entire Third Army north in just a matter of days, marching in freezing conditions to strike the German flank and relieve the besieged town of Bastogne. The soldiers of the 101st Airborne had been surrounded and holding out against overwhelming odds. Patton's arrival saved them and helped turn the tide of the battle. Eisenhower called it nothing short of brilliant. By the spring of 1945, Patton's army was racing into Germany, liberating concentration camps, capturing hundreds of thousands of enemy soldiers, and pushing deeper and faster than almost anyone else. His men admired him, not just because he won, but because he led from the front. He visited hospitals, spoke with wounded soldiers, and reminded them that their sacrifices mattered. For all his rough edges, Patton inspired loyalty, but victory brought out his most controversial side. With Germany defeated, Patton was put in charge of part of the occupation. He clashed with his superiors almost immediately. He believed former Nazi officials could still be useful in administration. He compared the Nazi Party to political parties in the U.S., a comment that horrified both the press and his commanders. Eisenhower had tolerated Patton's outbursts during the war because his results on the battlefield were undeniable. But in peace, the risk was too high. Eisenhower removed him from command. In December 1945, Patton's story came to an abrupt end. While riding in a car near Mannheim, Germany, his vehicle collided with a truck. Patton was badly injured, suffering a broken neck. He lingered for nearly 2 weeks before dying on December 21st, at the age of 60. For a man who seemed destined for glory in battle, to die in a car accident after the war felt almost surreal. So, how should we remember George S. Patton? He was brilliant but flawed. He could inspire men to achieve the impossible, but he could also alienate allies with his arrogance. He believed in speed, aggression, and total commitment. He once said, "Lead me, follow me, or get out of my way." And that wasn't just bravado, it was how he lived every single day. Love him or hate him, Patton was a force of nature. He left his mark on the Second World War in a way few others did, and his legend still marches on, long after the last shot was fired.
We passed over a destroyed land, utterly destroyed. You who have not seen it do not know what hell looks like from the top. That's what Germany looks like. That's what Austria looks like. That's what any place that the 8th Air Force and the 3rd Army worked on looks like.